All right, Amanda, you're all set.
All right, thank you. Morning, everybody. Welcome to Government Operations Committee, Thursday, June 6th, 2024. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Don't think so. We do have comments from the public. All right, thank you all for being here. I'm just going to read our rules for speaking under privilege of the floor. I agree to a 3-minute time limit. I agree not to raise my voice. I agree not to use lewd, obscene, profane, slanderous, or libelous language to speak or act in a manner that would tend to incite a breach of the peace. I agree not to speak about county personnel matters. Personnel matters include comments about the job performance of named county employees other than elected officials. After 3 minutes, I agree to leave the microphone and yield the floor. Transferring time to another person is not permitted. I agree to be courteous and not make comments, gestures, outbursts, or other disruptions while other members of the public or legislators are speaking. I agree that if I cause a disruption and am asked to leave, I will leave the chambers. For folks, I have 3 blue cards here. If you're interested in speaking, fill one out and give it to me, and we'll get you on the list. Okay, so first up is Nate Cook.
Good morning. Thanks to the committee for welcoming us to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys. I know a bunch of people in the room, but for those that don't know me, my name's Nate Cook. I'm the managing partner of Klausner Cook here in Ithaca, which is a law firm. And I have a team of 15 people, and what we do all day long is we look at property transactions, and we look at assessments, and we look at various things related to buying, selling, developing, financing, all those types of things. And the reason I'm here today to talk to you guys is I think there's some real challenges in how the county goes about the assessment process. And I'd encourage the legislature to kind of work on this problem so that we can try to make the system more equitable. I see lots of examples of people that are upset because their assessments are going up, yet the big boxes don't change. Or this process of trying to reassess every year, I think is impossible. There's 36,000 tax parcels in Tompkins County, and I don't think it's even possible with any size workforce to realistically sort of do that. So the 3 things that I'm asking for today is, 1, I'd like to have some sort of advisory council or some sort of opportunity for people from the public to liaise with the legislature to see if we can work on some solutions, because I'm not sure that I have the exact answer, but I know that if we work on it together, I think we can make improvements. I'd also like to look at the sort of the notice process. I brought my notice from my own personal house, my 3-bedroom colonial in Northeast, and it looks like the assessment is going up by more than $70,000, and it says that I'm going to have an increase in my taxes of $191. And I'll bet everyone in the room a beverage of their choice that I think the number is closer to 2,000 than it is to 200. And so I think it's really disingenuous to send these notices out that don't accurately reflect what's really going to happen. And that's part of this assessment process that I want to explore, is how do we have a better change of that. So it's kind of these 3 things: the advisory council, the notices, and changing the sort of annual reassessment process. And I'll yield the rest of my time. Thanks, everybody.
Great, thank you. Next up, I have Connor Gaffney, sorry.
Horrendous handwriting sometimes. Good morning, my name's Connor Gaffney. Probably no one knows me, but I'm originally born and raised in Ithaca, New York. I left for about 20 years and just moved back in 2021. I own 2 rental properties here in Ithaca, and I just wanted to come and speak about my experience with the assessment. And I own 1 property on Cuga Street, and I own 1 in Ellis Hollow. And specifically, my unit in Ellis Hollow, when I first got notice of my assessment, it was supposedly going to go up more than 40%, which was fine. I could cover that. I could make that work. But the concern is, you know, being from Ithaca, I have a passion for this place. I have a passion for the people that live here. I have a passion for my tenants. I don't just see them as a number. They're a person to me. They're a living being. They're someone that I try to care about and make their lives better through my being a landlord. And the issue is I then have to pass that cost on to them. And when I looked at it, for me, I couldn't raise their rents by 40% because of the impact that that would make on me. So for me, what I would like to see, similar to Nate, is the process looked at. How is this going about? Because it just occurred to me and to many other property owners, like there was just a board and they had some darts and they just said, okay, this group here, we're gonna raise them by that much. And there was no real possibility to be able to assess the 36,000 plus parcels that are in Ithaca. I think there's only 7 people that work on the assessment. And so I think you had like a minute and a half each when we broke down how much that would take to actually realistically assess these. But for myself, I would just love to see this looked at and figured out and a proper system put in place that works for everyone, that's fair, that's equitable, that makes sense. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And the third and last card I have, again, if anybody wants to speak, please bring these up, is Charlie O'Connor.
Hello, everybody. Yep, Charlie O'Connor. I'm here today as a local resident, also here sort of representing a group that has kind of forming, which I think is kind of interesting. When the assessment notices came out, a lot of us started chatting, and we ended up leading to a couple public forums that were held, actually, leading up to the school vote. So there was actually 3 public forums held, and there was over, I think, 300 people that showed up in total at the 3 events. And I'm kind of speaking on some of these voices and the topics that were kind of brought up at this meeting. You know, we're kind of excited about this group forming because our goal is obvious, is actually going to be to, you know, try to look at some of these things such as the assessments, the school budget, you know, the work and the job that all the county legislators do to help run this great county and city that we live in here. And see if we can support in some ways by bringing forward maybe ideas that might make more sense, or kind of sharing information from like what we're seeing as a group. I mean, this group has got about 100 members that are going to be signing up here pretty soon as the group is formed. We represent about 5,000 beds throughout the city of Ithaca, so it's a fairly decent sized group. A lot of these folks are, you know, well rooted into our community as like business owners and families and coaches and leaders in our community. So I think it's a very great group to work with. And we would like to invite the county to see if the county be more interested in sitting down and maybe sharing some of the ideas. You know, in 3 minutes I can't share these ideas. But to start, I think it was very interesting. I think a lot of people were very fed up with sort of the spending in the Ithaca City schools and, you know, how that correlates to the assessments. And I thought it was incredible to see like how many people actually came out and voted this past vote, which was pretty interesting. You know, I think people were really upset with, you know, the performance that we're even seeing going on in the school a little bit. But, you know, it's all tied in. As, you know, we got in and started looking at this a little bit more, you know, and you peel back these layers, they're all connected, you know, and I think we have an affordability crisis here in Ithaca. And the idea that we have, you know, some of the highest taxes in not only just the state, but the country. And, you know, we're not just making it harder for people to move from, you know, other places to come to our city. And, you know, long-term, that creates some serious problems. You know, it creates problems with like companies not being able to hire and recruit and retain people properly. I think it's, you know, it's even worse when you have people that have lived here for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I heard a lot of these stories at these forums where, you know, they don't want to leave Ithaca. They just can't afford to live in Ithaca anymore. So they're actually putting their houses up for sale. And like, you know, and my neighbor across the street literally just put their house up for sale, said he was 90 years old. He said, I cannot afford an extra $1,000 a month of property tax. You know, I've lived here my whole life. I don't want to move. But he put his house up for sale and it just went under contract. You know, and I think when we start driving people out of here, you know, it makes it really challenging in a community, you know. So we'd really like an opportunity to maybe look more like just to sort of echo those notices. I think it was very hard for people to make an educated decision when you get those notices. Like, I'll give you one example. I had a building of mine go up $110,000, so my notice said that my estimated increased tax payment is $247 next year. Well, I know based on the school, county, and city tax rates that if it goes up $110,000, that it's really going to go up closer to $3,600, $3,700. We don't see any relief in the rate. So, and I think when those notices were issued, we really weren't projecting to see too much or as much as the relief was showing, which was about 3.5%, you know, about 1.9 in the school, because the school already had said they're looking to hold the rate, right? So, like, anyway, I think those notices made it very challenging for people to make an educated decision, because I can't tell you how many people I heard come back and say, you know, our assessment went up $100,000, but our estimate only showed that it's going to increase.
Wrap up your comments.
Okay.
Thanks.
So anyway, thank you for the county for everything that everybody does to, you know, help run this. And I would be really interested if we could have another opportunity to sit down and kind of look further into some of these things that we're seeing and hearing recently. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. That would be for me. All right, and last but not least, Keith Fox.
Hello, how we doing? I just found out about this meeting this morning, so I didn't really have too much time to prepare anything, but I figured I'd share a couple personal stories as a property owner in the Ithaca area and dealing with the assessment office. A lot of times these assessments come out and I disagree with them, and I do my research, I bring my comps, and I present it, I think, in a very accurate way. I say, hey, this is why it's overpriced. And more than that, I've been denied. I bought a property for $150,000 5 years ago. That same year, it got reassessed at $160,000. I said, hey, I'm the comp. I just bought the property. Next year, it went up to $170,000. I brought more comps from the area, brought pictures, at least I think I brought pictures. Like, hey, I can't sell this for $170,000. I'm telling you right now. Then it went up to $179,000, and then this year, I got a notice saying it was going up to $210,000. Well, in March, I sold it for $150,000, which was the comp I was coming with. It's worth $150,000. I sold it for $150,000. It went up every year for 5 years. I don't know what I could have done different. That's just one example. Another is I have a duplex on South Hill that I looked at a property directly next door, larger size, better view, a little bit older, but not necessarily dated. I was assessed at a higher price. It sold at a much lower price. I said, hey, look, house next door sold at a lower price. Presented that, my assessment didn't go down. This year, my assessment's gone up again. I found a property that sold about 6 houses down at a lower price on a square footage basis, on a per beds basis, a duplex, it's similar. I brought the other comp from the year before. I don't know if I'll have it go down, but I still haven't rented that duplex, you know? It's vacant right now. I'm bringing my rents down. I'm trying to get it rented out, but my assessments keep going up. COVID was memorable because, as we all know, there was a rent moratorium on, and everyone was told they didn't have to pay their rents, but all my assessments went up. And I heard the assessment office, I'm like, hey, I gotta pay more taxes, but no one's paying me rent. Like, sorry, nothing we can do about it. And at that time, you know, none of the banks came out and offered any mortgage relief for 3 months or any of the programs that were ended up coming into effect. It was more of a, you just gotta deal with it. And I'm just getting sick of just having to deal with it. I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm being professional about it. I'm doing my research, and that I'm right, and I'm being ignored. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for coming. It's good for us to hear from the public and hear what you have to say. We do have a discussion about assessment on our agenda this morning, but it's not necessarily going to be covering your topics and concerns. As you know, Greg has brought these things to us, and the legislature as a whole has had conversations, and it is a continuing conversation. So just because we may not talk about it this morning doesn't mean that we're not hearing you, and we've heard other stories like this. So thank you for coming. Let's go ahead and do the minutes of May 2nd, 2024. Can I get somebody? Susan moves those. Oop. Rich seconds. Thank you. Questions or comments on the minutes? All right, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. We do have one advisory board appointment. That is Eve Snyder to the Tompkins County Historical Commission. Term expires December 31st, 2026. Somebody move. Mike moves. Rich seconds. Questions or comments on that? Mike?
She's been an excellent member of that commission. She works at the History Center, and we're glad to have her.
Great. Thank you. Anything else? Let's go ahead and vote. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. All right. Well, moving on to the man of the hour. Thanks for being here, Jay. You have some reports and discussion for us. We aren't going to be voting on anything, but why don't you go ahead and dive on in?
Yep. Thanks. I wanted to bring some of this legislation that was recently passed and also some old legislation back to you. I didn't want to go through and create the resolution, the local law, the public hearing, and all of that fun stuff until I got your opinions as to where to go with this or what you needed on it. So some new legislation that came through as part of the budget bill. The Judicial Security Act. Has anyone heard of this?
No, and
It's going to be a fun thing.
Yeah.
So at the request of a judge or their immediate family, and I don't know the definition of what that would be, the court will mandate that any references to the judge's addresses, their mailing address, their property location will be stricken from the internet. So we got to go and find all of our old assessment rolls that are online and remove those references. I am concerned about future references. We use the state database currently, and there's no way for me to restrict an owner's name going out. If we don't have that information in our database, how will they get tax bills? How will they get assessment change notices? How will they get variance notices sent to them? There's a lot of questions in here. The state was saying, well, you need to work with your vendors to display this information. I'm like, no, the state needs to create a button in their database that says this information is going to be restricted on what comes out of there, because we still need to know who owns a property. The state still needs to know who owns a property for star exemption. So I've already talked with our IT department and talked to Holly on this, so it's on people's radar. And I think the implementation date is like mid-July as to when this will happen. And then we have 72 hours to comply with that request. And if you think about it, if you want to really dive down deep into this, if you have a survey of a neighboring parcel of the judge's parcel, their name's going to be on that survey in most cases. So are we going to have to restrict those neighboring surveys? There's a lot of questions. I just think it's good as the county to have a process and procedure in place of this. These are the steps we took. This is how we removed it. So that if there is a odd name out there, I don't even know, there's the taxlookup.net where you can look up your school taxes, tax glance for your town and county typically. You can't just wipe the internet clean. So I don't know where this is going to go to, but stay tuned on that one.
Let's pause and we can talk about each one. Mike.
You said the judge's family. Is that defined?
It is. It's immediate family, I believe. So it could be kids. I don't know if it would go to grandkids.
So this could be, what, a dozen parcels for each appointed judge, for example.
Correct. And every town with their justice, the Supreme Court
Oh my
justice.
gosh, I hadn't even thought about the town and village justices too.
Yeah. And
my
then their
gosh.
family as well. It's one of those things that scares me, just because I don't know what it is.
Well, it's
know.
it's this internet craze that everything's got to be on the internet. It used to be a lot of things. You take the circuits court, for example, everything's on the internet now. It used to be always open to public record, but you needed to go to the office and look it up. And that's the way it ought to be here. And this just seems to be, I realize I'm not with the wave of the future, because I don't believe that the convenience of some people is the way everybody ought to have to work at things. But that's interesting. Thank you for letting us know about this law.
Rich?
Yeah, I echo what Mike just said. Judges are public figures like us, and there's a downside to that. People can find us, and if you want to be on the legislature, you have to accept that. I don't think it's a good thing to have our judges be hidden. I think we need to protect them. We need to make sure they're secure and safe and that they can do their jobs. But the idea that they can become anonymous is creepy. And here we are. Yeah. Anyway.
It says at the request of a judge. I mean, is the sense that every judge will request it? Or you don't really know?
I don't know. I know we've talked to a few over the years that wanted their name removed. Our recommendation was put it in an LLC with something like that that's going to hide the ownership. I mean, that's not really our recommendation. That was an option that we provided to them because we just couldn't remove people's names.
Okay.
Sometimes, names do get misspelled in our records. We've had some domestic violence requests, and I don't know how that happens, but somehow the name does get misspelled in our records.
Is there anything that we can do to help you on this?
I don't think so. Now that we have Maury, sorry, hard to say. Hopefully with IT, now that my grievance day is over, we can all get together. I can think of the county clerks, planning has a lot of information out there. Just to get together and take a stock of what we have and try to figure out what our process is to remove it.
Okay.
So stay
Susan?
tuned.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time. I know we have a lot, but just thinking about how, the internet is this huge thing where, as been proven since it started, information is not often corrected. So is there any mechanism for corrections? I mean, you can search anything on the internet, and you might find something from 20 years ago that has never been corrected. So that's one of the concerns I have about some of this, is that the amount of incorrect or old and outdated information. I don't know if there was any plan for that. There generally hasn't been.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there's not now.
Yeah, I wouldn't anticipate, but yeah. It'll be fun.
All right. Oh, yeah, Rich.
The legislation, what happens when somebody stops being a judge? Is there some sort of notification?
I don't know that.
Okay.
This was one of those things that we had heard was in the budget, and then we heard was going to be removed, and then it appeared when it was passed. So I didn't even know about it. NISAC contacted me and was like, what does this mean? And it was like, oh, shoot, it was in. So we'll figure it out. The next two are new exemptions that New York State has authorized local municipalities to adopt. And of course, New York State, in their infinite wisdom, assigned them the same statute number. So we have now two RPTL 421Ps. Out of all of
one.
Yeah. I mean, at least come up with another letter, come up with something different so you know which one of these.
Letters are expensive. You don't want to waste.
So the first one is authorized by Part GG of the ELHF part of the budget. This is an exemption of capital improvements to residential new construction involving the creation of accessory dwelling units. So this would provide a phased-in exemption over 10 years for any newly reconstructed, altered, improved, where they add one or more additional residential dwelling units to the same parcel. The first year will be fully exempt, 25% taxable, 50, 75, and then they said, let's stop going by 25% and go by 10% to 85 to 95, and then finally fully taxable. So there are some local options that we can have on there and what type of construction, but this seemed like one of the exemptions that we may be trying to encourage. So that's why I brought it forward. So if I, oh, sorry, I don't.
Yeah, no questions on that, Rich?
Yeah, I find this one interesting in that it parallels essentially what the IDA does, but we can't help small projects. It's just not economically efficient for the IDA to step in. But it seems to be supporting something that we would like in our community, that we're going to have density, we're going to have more housing, or encourage more housing, and creative use. That for, say, elderly parents, this might be a good option, you know, to stay within a family unit. I think we should look at this one.
Mike?
Just typically, let's say I have a single-family house and zoning lets me put in a, make it into a duplex. Does the assessment on that generally go up in a situation like that?
Yeah, as with any answer with appraisal, it depends. So if you're adding space, then typically the value will improve. If you're simply already had 2 units already there and you're just putting in a firewall separation, depending on the location, that may or may not add value. Some people may not want the tenant in their house and would prefer that extra space as a in-law apartment, kids apartment, throw them downstairs so that you don't hear them. I wish my basement was finished and I could do that. So that's kind of where it really depends on that.
But I'm just saying that there may be a lot of situations for small capital projects that there would be no benefit because it might not change the assessment.
Correct. Yep. So this would only be for that increase. But hopefully if it's, you know, adding a new unit that wasn't there, that would add value. And can I add one more thing about riches? We already have a exemption out there. It's a parent-grandparent exemption. So if you add a dwelling unit that's separate, you can't just add a room, it has to be its own self-contained unit. That's going to be fully exempt from county taxes as long as the parent-grandparent lives in that unit.
Greg?
Well, that's a good new one to learn, so appreciate you adding that. I think this is an interesting one that we definitely should explore. I echo a lot of Rich's comments. And is this something that we can only put this exemption in for county taxes, and then all the other taxing jurisdictions would have to move to accept this as an exemption for their taxing jurisdiction?
Correct. Yeah, that's why I'm trying to come to you early. I'm unfortunately going to miss your July meeting, so I wanted to get here in June, bring these up, see what you're going to do in August, because even though I'll send this out to all of our towns and they don't typically have to follow what you do or don't follow what you do, they always like to know. So that's where I try getting the county to do something first and then say, hey, the county adopted this, do you want to? And more places seem to follow if we do something.
Yeah, I think this is definitely worthy and could really help with adding additional units within the community. So I think this is a good thing.
All right, the next 421P?
Yep, this one's more confusing and I don't quite know how it's going to be administered, but for apartments where there's 10 or more units that are rented with an income restriction based upon when they rented it and not necessarily when they renew it, there's a lot more into it. This one, I don't know who would be responsible for verifying the income of these units, how it changes. Is that going to fall upon the developer to give it to me? This is one of those that I think we should wait. You know, we have a lot of low-income tax credit housing that's been built over the last few years. I think that's more of a mechanism for this type of housing, and it'll also give me a little more time to really figure out what this means. Does anybody adopt it? How is it going on, and how is it being administered? So, but I still wanted to bring this to your attention. You know,
Mike?
Sorry, I guess I'm not following. It does what with the low-income exemption?
No, this just provides an exemption for an apartment building with 10 or more units that has a rental restriction as to the income that the person can have in their initial sign-up period. In future sign-up periods, their income can change. So you know, my office isn't going to verify the income of people who are renting apartments within a building. So I don't know if that's going to have to fall on the developer, if they partner with INHS. There's just too many questions on this for me to be able to say, hey, let's go ahead and administer this one right now.
I can see that.
It'll still be on my radar. You'll still hear about it once I learn more of it, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention so that you know about it.
Rich?
Yeah, I agree with that, Jay. This is something that on the larger projects, the IDA has had to contend with because of doing affordable housing projects, and you should not underestimate the administrative cost and work involved in verifying income levels. INHS does it, there's other third parties, and in that case we have the project fund that third-party tracking, but we don't have that mechanism set up, and we'd really have to think about how we were going to do it before we'd consider something like this, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so yes on one.
All right.
Wait on the second. All right, now we're going to get into old legislation. You know, periodically I want to bring these back just to take a look to see if our exemption limits are appropriate, if we want to change them, increase them, just to bring to your attention. So for 2023, we finally were allowed to increase the senior exemptions. So we went from $29,000 up to $35,000 for 50% exemption, and then $37,400 up to $43,400 for a 5% exemption. The state can allow us to go up to—
Is that income?
That is adjusted gross income minus any IRA distributions, adding back in any untaxed Social Security. There's a few other provisions of we only allow $1,500 per capital loss, or for a loss on each schedule. So it's most of the time that doesn't come into play for your average senior. So it's just your AGI minus any taxable IRA distributions plus untaxed Social Security. So we can go all the way up to $50,000. I wanted to bring this back every kind of 2 years just to see if we wanted to go. So my questions on all of these would you like to see a local law increasing the exemption? And then what amount? If we went to $50,000 for a 50% exemption, we would probably have about 1,200 new senior applications according to what New York State has told me. Tammy's great. Tammy can't handle 1,200 new applications. So there would be a cost associated with that. I'd anticipate somewhere between $30,000 to $40,000 to process that, but depending on our 2025 budget, that may be part of our 2025 budget, so it wouldn't be any additional cost.
Rich, and then Mike.
Do you have any estimate as to the 1,200 properties, if they got a 50% exemption, what kind of tax revenue we'd be foregoing?
I don't, but I can give you that when I come back in August with it. You know, I can have a local law ready to go, and all we have to define what that M is. So I could try to come up with an estimate up to 50. And if you have a number between 35 and 50 that you want me to look at as well, then we can interpolate what those other levels may be.
Do you have a ballpark what we're doing now for this exemption in terms of revenue we're not collecting?
I would probably guess and say there's 400 to 500 million would be my guess.
This is big.
If you talk for a little bit, I could get you a real number very quickly.
All right, I think Mike had his hand up, but.
Yeah, I think that we should raise this. I'm not sure we should go to 50 in one fell swoop, but maybe raise it 5,000 or something. And in my own legal practice, I've had at least 2 clients that I thought should have it, but they didn't qualify because they were just over the amount. And maybe a spouse had died or something like that, and was a difficult situation trying to pay their taxes. So I would like to see us raised to 45 or something like that. Maybe do it in stages.
It's about 125 million is the total value of exemptions for county tax purposes.
Wow, all right.
So that's the assessed value that we're exempting?
Correct.
Okay. And then so that would be whatever our tax rate is, would be the revenue loss to the county?
Well, it's not really revenue loss. It would just be revenue shifted, because you're still going to generate your $53 million in the tax levy. It's just going to be, with the exemption, it's a smaller base. So if the exemption went away, it'd be a bigger base.
I guess then the question is, what's the differential that they don't pay?
Yeah, so with that, it'll say here, here's the increase in the exemption. The tax base will then be reduced by that amount. You will see a new overall county tax rate. The difference in that tax rate applied to the median assessment will show an $8.64 increase on the median tax bill. So if you're at 125 million, you're at, say $5 per thousand. I think it's like 417 would be the blended county rate.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out
$100,000.
how much the people who would get this exemption, how much that total is.
So I would tend to agree with Mike. Like, let's change it a little bit.
It's about $500,000 to $600,000.
But I think Jay is looking for, a response. Do we want him to come back with a resolution in August saying we will make some change to this? Mike?
Yes, very much. I'd like to see him do that. And maybe he could have time then to have a chart with blanks in the resolution, and we could pick one.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I'll have the resolution, and all you have to do is define M, and M is at 50%.
Okay.
And maybe by then there is a two-house bill out there now that'll let us go above 50%. I don't know if there's time to actually get that done and passed, but you may see that I think you could go up to 65% is what that two-house bill is.
Okay. Greg?
So we saw yesterday at the Housing and Economic Development Committee from the Chamber, from 2022 Tompkins County annual median household income, which I think these are based on some HUD numbers and other things, was like 69,000 was the annual median household income for 2022. And then the percentages based off the HUD definition of low income being 20,999 to 55,996, and then extremely low income is less than 20,998. So I think that 50,000-ish range, plus or minus 5 either direction, kind of fits within that definition and is, I think, supported by other information. So it's not like a harebrained guess. I think this makes a lot of sense, and I think it's something we should do because that number is going to continue to probably increase as inflation and everything takes place.
All right, others? Rich?
Just thinking out loud, given our budget year and the challenges we're going to face, it's hard to shift tax responsibility, especially the people who came and talked to us just before or at the beginning of our meeting. I'm thinking if we're going to make a change, maybe go halfway to 40,000. Just thinking out loud.
I can do that analysis to show 40 and 50, and then if you want to pick a number in the middle, the line's going to be there for you to see what that impact would be.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Thank you. All right, now the same thing, somewhat similar. We have the alternative veterans exemption. So this provides an exemption for a veteran who served during a period of conflict. JR is working on some of this information, so we'll be bringing this back in August as well in order for him to provide you also with some information on this. So this exemption, it allows for a 15% exemption up into a capped amount. And we last increased this in 1997. So we went up to 15% or $15,000, whichever is less. There's also an extra 10% for a veteran who served in the combat theater. And then there's also a 50% exemption based upon their disability rating. So if they were 80% disabled, they would get a 40% exemption up until that capped amount. And then on, I think, the next couple pages, if you go down 2 pages from that or
before
one.
You get there, Jay?
Yeah.
What is the 15,000? Is that?
That's the reduction in taxable value that the veteran would receive. So if their house was worth $300,000, 15% would be $45,000, but it's capped at the $15,000. You know, back in 1997, values were much lower, 15%. We ran into 15% a lot more often than we do now on here. And on the chart, it says veteran exemption scale options. We're a little bit above the state law basic maximum, which was 12,000. That's what it was when we adopted it. But we can go all the way up to 45,000 for that 15% exemption.
Okay, everyone has the chart, right? You've had a chance to look at that. Is this something we want to consider further? In a similar way, you'd have a chart and we could pick the number, Rich?
I guess going back to what we were just talking about, I'd like to get a sense of what this would cost.
Right.
Yep.
How much?
Yep, that's always part of it. And, you know, do you have a feeling on a number?
No, because I don't know what it costs. It's
All
right, I'll take a look at, say, doubling it to 30, see what that would be.
I was going to say 25, 30, something like that.
Yeah, you know, all in all, it's about $12 million of what we provide for the alternative veterans exemption. So doubling that would get you, you know, to 24 million, probably not. In our tax base of $11.7 billion, it's not that significant.
So given what you were just telling us a little while ago, it's less than $100,000?
Yeah.
With that in mind, I think we should be trying to do something for our veterans. I wouldn't be opposed to, as Mike said, going up to 25 or 30.
All right.
All right.
Next one. This is this is the Cold War veterans exemption. So this is for the veteran who served, I think, between 75 and 91. I have that figure on this chart. Sorry, 45. So between one of the ends of World War II and then one of the starts of the Iraq conflict. Of course, New York State in their infinite wisdom ended World War II on 2 different days. One was when the fighting actually stopped, and the other one was when the papers were signed on the USS something or another.
Missouri.
There you go. So those 2 dates are kind of in there. This is an exemption we looked at back when it started, and we declined to offer it at that time. This had to have been 2003 or 4, because I know Steve Witcher was the county administrator at that time. We didn't provide this, and this is not me. I'm just providing some historical background on it, because these were veterans who served when there wasn't war happening. So they wanted to make that distinction and provide an exemption for a veteran who was serving during that period of conflict and had a little more likelihood of being sent to war.
Mike?
All of these exemptions, they continue for a spouse, say, after the decease of the veteran. Is that true?
Correct. As long as it's the unremarried spouse, the exemption will continue on. This Cold War veteran, it starts off as a 10-year exemption, and then you can authorize it to go further than 10 years. Right now, only 4 towns offer it: Caroline, Danby, Lansing, and Groton. I'm trying to work with JR to figure out what the impact of this would be. When I looked at it in 2004, I grossly overestimated how many veterans we may have around, trying to go off state numbers. And, you know, we only had 40 people, 40 Cold War veterans apply for this in those towns, so it's not that significant. However, if we were to adopt it, I think we'd get a little more word out than the towns have done. So I'll
bring
back something
that
on this
one too. I think, yeah. Okay.
And then the last one is the business improvement exemption. So we're in this exemption, but we only offer it at 0%. Oddly enough, you can't opt out of this exemption. You can only reduce the exemption that you grant to 0. So we reduced this back in 1988. I was told we reduced this to 0 because we were scared of Home Depot coming in and all of the big box stores. So we wanted to make sure that they didn't get an exemption if they came in. Okay. You know, this provides a 50% exemption in year 1, 45, 40 as you move along down. So it's really for any commercial projects. I know I get a lot of phone calls for smaller commercial developments that don't necessarily meet the IDA's efficiency as to the cost of that. So the IDA is more for the bigger, and this would be more available for the smaller. Most of the big places have opted out. City of Ithaca, Town of Ithaca, Ithaca City School District, but however, it's in more of the more rural towns and more rural school districts as well. And then oddly enough, the Village of Lansing offers this at 1%, declining by 0.1% each year. Just one more thing for us to manage. When I asked them why they did it, nobody could tell me why they did it and went to 1, but they've continued on as 1.
Mike?
Yeah, I remember when we first came on the legislature, maybe even before that, a big controversy about the big box stores getting any exemption at all for building because they didn't need it. Stu Stein led the charge on that, as I recall. And that's why the county doesn't do it. I think that's why the city doesn't do it, because they don't need that to attract people. But in Dryden, I believe the town, village, and school district all allow that because they want to use that as a tool to attract business. And just sort of what you just said.
Your thoughts, Greg?
Yeah, I think this is something we should be doing. I think if we look at, equity and trying to understand how the IDA process is for the big fish, there's really nothing to help the little fish. And yes, there may be some big fish that take this as an opportunity, but I think we're in a time where we need to be attracting, commercial development and jobs and, industry into our community so that we can continue to thrive. So I think that this is an important one that we definitely should be looking at.
All right, Rich, you had your hand up?
I do. I think this has always been a struggle for the IDA that, the application process is cumbersome as it has to be, and it really doesn't make economic sense unless it's a large project. However, I look at this and it's a pretty blunt instrument in that you'd have to do an exemption that covered a broad class of businesses. And one of the key principles for the IDA is that we don't incentivize businesses that would be coming in and getting an advantage competing with existing businesses. So say we wouldn't give an incentive to a pharmacy to come in to sit next to an existing pharmacy and compete with them, because that wouldn't be fair. We do participate in housing projects, but that's mainly because there's seem to be a consensus that we don't have enough. So building more is okay. I think that would change if we got to the point where we weren't getting steady direction that housing was an issue. But I guess I'd like to know, if we did this kind of exemption, would there be ways to tailor it to prevent incentivizing new businesses over existing ones? For example, we don't do restaurants, because you have restaurants and you don't want to.
Yeah, no, we can restrict the exemption to only some types of businesses and different categories here, so we could get creative as to what we would want to incentivize if we wanted to target that.
Yeah, seems to make sense. Greg?
Yeah, I mean, Rich, to your point, if you look at some of the tax-abated housing projects that have attracted students, right, that compete with student housing to live in them, downtowns.
You mean you're talking about dormitories competing?
No, I'm talking about like City Center and some of the other projects where students are opting to live there. Okay. Those projects are competing with other types of housing within the market. So I hear the argument, but I think in reality, it is already competing. Because they're attracting people to another place rather than to College Town, where those exemptions and abatements and things like that don't exist. So I hear that, but I think it's important to incentivize and continue to grow our economic engine, and we do that through creating more opportunity, more choice, and more access to jobs for people.
Yes, but we are going to need to move on from assessment. We've been talking about this for 45 minutes. So last couple thoughts, and then let's move on. Rich?
I agree with what you say, Greg. I think there's other ways to do it, such as the IAD revolving loan fund and other ways we can assist new businesses. I'd be nervous about this one.
All right, well, it's something to continue talking about, but I think we do want to see more information.
Yeah, I'll bring that back and leave a section where we could target it if we need to.
Okay. Other last questions or comments for Jay? Mike?
Are you seeing seeing what's happened with the volunteer fireman exemptions? Have that been a lot of people applying for that? I remember there was questions about whether they wanted their tax exemption or whether they wanted the real property exemption.
Yeah, we probably have about 40 or so volunteers who have applied for that. I did just see the income tax credit was increased from $200 to $800 per volunteer. I know there was legislation out there allowing both the property tax exemption and the income tax exemption to be claimed by that volunteer. So I got to see where that bill comes out if that's passed. But we do have those 40. I'm hoping so, because it's so confusing. When we granted that exemption, we tried to look at what their estimate savings was. If it's going to be less than $200, we said, no, you don't want to claim this.
All right.
Please take the income tax credit. But now we granted people who may have a $400 savings when their income tax credit could be $800. So we got to figure this one out. This is another one of those of not really knowing what's happening at the state level until it happens.
And Amanda, if I may, just one other comment. I was glad to see the people out today who had on the public comment period, but it's clear from their comments, they still don't understand the difference between changes in assessment and changes in tax. They're saying that you know, the increase in their assessment equals the increase in the taxes, and it doesn't. We just have to keep at that, trying to help folks understand how assessment works.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and people don't call me up to ask the questions. You know, a lot of the things we do, it's set in the real property tax law, and that's why we do them. You know, I don't think the disclosure notice was misleading at all. I think it was very informative for what it was. This is the effect of the change in assessment on your taxes. It doesn't say this is what your taxes are going to be next year. It says this is what your taxes would have been last year if this was in place. That way I can show the effect of what my office does. And then the schools, the towns, the county, they should then show effect of what they do with their spending.
All right,
But
we know.
along with saying that, we could do a lot better. I love this extra discussion with my office. Finally, we're kind of coming to the limelight here. Normally, the assessor just kind of thrown to the corner and don't make any waves, but this is great. I think we could do a lot more, and you'll see that with our 2025 budget submission.
And I believe you and Greg are still going to be talking about the letter that goes out. We had talked about that last month and bringing that back to GO as if, you know, if there's more to discuss and change. Last comment.
No, I just think it's really important that when we have public commenters, we don't diminish their ability or their knowledge or their understanding of something. I think the folks that spoke today have a pretty clear understanding of how taxes work. I think if you looked at what they pay in taxes, there's probably quite a bit that they add up and contribute. They're pretty savvy business people. They have a pretty good understanding of it. The assessment is a part of the tax equation, right? So if other pieces of the equation change, it goes up. If the assessment change goes up and the rate stays the same, then what somebody may pay. So I think there's just a lot of things. So I'd be cautioning us to constantly be throwing public commenters under the bus that they don't understand what's going on, because they do.
Okay,
Well,
I'm not sure that's what happened.
Greg, that's a shot at me, and I just want to say that I know what I heard.
Sure.
And I'm glad they came, I'm glad they talked, but there's a basic misunderstanding among some of them.
All right, thank you all. We agree to disagree on some things, and thank you very much, Jay, for all the work you do and for spending an hour with us this morning. We have lots and lots more to discuss this morning. We are going to move on to administration, and we have 4 wonderful policies to talk about. Let's go ahead and get the first one on the floor. Resolution to update the Administrative Policy Manual, Policy 03-04, Emergency Leave Sharing Program. Can somebody move that? Rich moves, seconded by Susan. Thank you. I guess I'll turn to you, and then we can see if there's questions.
Sure. So actually, the first 2 policies are from our Human Resources Department, but I believe the intent of updating this policy was just to make sure we had sort of formalized what the current program is. Then I'll let Ruby give some more detail.
Correct. In the emergency leave sharing program, we just simply wanted to reflect the current policy that is used by the HR department. So in the policy, there was a clarification that you must be employed for at least a year, and that you can get a 4 consecutive weeks emergency leave, but it doesn't have to be day after day. It doesn't have to be consecutive. You're allowed up to 4 weeks of emergency leave. and just revising the form so that if you can donate leave and request leave with using the same form.
Okay, questions? I'm curious, like, how much people donate.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Emergency leave pool is a greatly used benefit
That's
for our
amazing.
employees. Once they've exhausted their accrued leave, sometimes there are emergencies that come that we have the flexibility to allow them up to 4 more weeks of leave.
That's great. That's great. Other questions about this one? Okay, ready to vote? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. All right, next one is the resolution to update the Administrative Policy Manual, Policy 02-42, Sexual Harassment Prevention. Can somebody move that? Mike moves, seconded by Susan.
And I'm moving the one with Maury's suggested.
Right, on your desk, there was a second slightly changed, but go ahead, Bridget or Ruby.
Okay. This policy was updated to reflect the changes in New York State legislation, and has also added clear definitions in the policy itself. And thank you, Maury, for the correction. Expanding the definition of hostile work environment so that it mirrors what has been changed in New York State, removing severe and pervasive. So there's a definitions for hostile work environment and others. It also includes the gender identifications, the statuses, just making it clearer what's included in this policy. There are responsibilities for supervisors, responsibilities for the employees, and a procedure for how we will investigate and the activities that we would do once a complaint has been submitted. One thing I'd like to make clear, just to bring out here that I think is a great addition to the policy for the county, there's page, okay, I don't see a page here, but there's a segment on intent versus impact, which is something that I think we often try to make clear to people. It may not have been your intent, but it's the impact that we have to look at. So the policy, I think, will help us greatly in training our employees and making them understand more what the policy is about.
Great. Questions, comments? Rich?
Yeah, I had a few different things. Let's see, on page 27, the red line language there. Do we need that definitional language starting out with any behaviors? Because it reads, any behaviors outlined in this policy that leave an employee feeling uncomfortable. That, I think, is too broad. That would entail any kind of management or discipline of an employee could be construed as harassment. I'd say remove that whole sentence and just add what you're trying to do there, talking about where can sexual harassment occur, and we want to be clear that it can be remote work too, but not include the definition.
The policy was created or revised based upon the model policy from the state. There are a couple of definitions that are broad, a couple of terms that are broad, which is going to really lead us to have very specific trainings. I'm not sure, I will defer to county attorney whether we can, well, we were trying to model the state policy. So do we do that all the way, or can we delete that sentence? I understand, I'm uncomfortable with that as well. There's also a term, less desirable. My question is, less desirable to whom? So there are a couple of terms in that policy that require, to me, specific training and further definition.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that up, Ruby, because I looked at this and I saw, say, on page 30 that there's the reference to under New York State human rights law. And I went to the law and I couldn't quite find that language. What I could find is the model policy, but the model policy, I don't know who wrote that, but they do seem to have taken some different approach from the actual legislation, and I'm uncomfortable basing a policy, our policy, on somebody's interpretation of law rather than the law itself. And I'd like us to be careful there, because in that intent clause, we do seem to be introducing potential liability for the county that's broader than we would want to do. We could get sued on this, and we should be very clear what behavior we're expecting. The actual law does not say not intending to harass is not a defense. And in fact, it poses it as an affirmative defense, but the language in the model policy doesn't talk about an affirmative defense. I think we should track the law rather than the policy. I'd be much more comfortable here.
Do you have any thoughts, Maury? Have you had a chance?
Yeah, no, microphone.
Can you pull your microphone down?
As with Ruby, most of, nearly all of these changes are indeed part of the department. I think the Department of Labor is the one that actually published some of these changes. So these are all drawn from here. I think with some of these, rather than not doing, sort of any, any reference that tracks the state policy, would be to fix it. So, for example, with this one, we should be clear that the intent of the behavior has to be because of sex. So that the intent of the intent of, I mean, I couldn't draft it as we speak, but something like that. These can these can be tweaked without tossing out what's in the Department of Labor's model policy.
Greg?
Yeah, could we maybe, is there time pressure? I mean, there's always time pressure on tightening up our policies, but is there something that maybe we could revisit now that that Maury's on board, and you guys could collaborate together to satisfy some of the concerns expressed by members of the committee?
Yes, I would be more than happy to.
Same.
Okay. Rich, did you have more?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I know we're time pressured,
Right.
but
No, but it would be good if we had Rich's comments and concerns, so that we'll know specifically some things to look at.
on page 31, the top, the language in purple, where we're talking about different definitions of gender. And at the end, the last line, I think this came from the model policy, again, they use the word respecting. And respecting has more than one meaning. It can mean pay attention to, acknowledge, recognize, but it also can mean agree. And I'm uncomfortable with that because I think we have a constitutional issue. There are people that do not agree with this at all, and they have strong religious beliefs that would, I think, impact that word respecting. I would far prefer the word recognizing or acknowledging instead of that. I think if somebody wants to be known by a certain pronoun, absolutely. Acknowledge it, recognize it, use it. But I'd prefer a value neutral word there. And then on page 32, there's the bullet points at the top. Creating different expectations for individuals based on their perceived identities. My comment is this is really vague. Is there any way to be more specific with that so we understand what it could mean? And then in the second set of bullet points, in red, refusing to provide a reference or providing an unwarranted negative reference. I was curious, do we have a present policy on providing references?
Refer to human resources. And then we simply provide title, salary, dates of employment.
So we've already addressed that. I guess it doesn't it doesn't have a, it's not a problem here other than it might be confusing to somebody, that a manager would say, I can do a reference outside of policy. And then I had a question on labeling an employee as difficult and excluding them from projects to avoid drama. Did that come from the state policy? Where did that come from? I don't like it. Because some people are difficult. Perhaps people are sitting in this room thinking Rich is being very difficult today. But that again seems to impinge on this idea of management of individuals, that some people take more management than others.
Rich, you know, there's nothing wrong with labeling a person as difficult.
Okay.
It's the reason for labeling the person as difficult. If you label the person as difficult because, for example, they have complained about sexual harassment or have requested an accommodation for a disability, it's that labeling that creates an issue under the human rights law as opposed to just a difficult person. You can certainly call out a difficult person and say you're difficult for any legitimate business reason.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it says examples of retaliation may include but are not limited to. So it seems to say that would be retaliation.
Right. But it has to be retaliation for protected activity under the
But if somebody is difficult. Anyway, that was my comment.
Thank you. Was that it for you, Rich?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Mike.
Yeah, this is a mandate. It's a good mandate to have a sexual harassment policy. I think we don't want to encourage or we don't want to see that in any of our departments or with respect to any of our employees or appointees or anybody else. It's unfunded because exactly what you are kind of said, Rich, it's inviting lawsuits. And we can expect that there will be lawsuits. And if we lose, we pay the attorney's fees for the people who bring the action against us. So it's a backdoor unfunded mandate, let's put it that way.
I was thinking as I read it that, you know, we all have the yearly training that we have to do, and I was feeling like this really reflected that a lot more of the, like, I think there was some new things we had to do that last year. So I really appreciated that. There was some stuff that was in here that was not in there before. I take all of your points, Rich. Some of them I agree with. I guess I don't necessarily agree with the word respecting. I don't find that to be problematic. I guess we could get into that conversation again about how do you define, how do we each use language, but to me that seems like an appropriate word. I also just wanted to note that I sent you all an email. Maury had that one change, just making sure that you were aware of that. And I think that's it. So, Susan.
I just wanted to say that, I mean, part of this is that if you have policies like this, part of the whole process is, in an organization with employees, is that you're training your staff and making sure they know the policies. And that goes a long way to preventive behavior. And I think there's no way to get as specific as probably we would like to. But that training is essential in an organization where I think people, you know, we're all human beings, and human beings find ways to navigate this and to torture each other. You know, and having worked in an organization where we had to train staff for this, they still find ways to get around things. I understand the lawsuit, but I think this is a good policy. I think it's really essential and very important that we support it, yeah. And I understand that you're not saying that you don't support
I wasn't saying it's
right.
a bad policy.
No, absolutely. And I understand what you're saying about respecting, but you know, when I looked at this, I looked at it with a view of if I had a big staff and I were training them, that would mean something to them. You know, so the psychology of having these policies as well as the legality is essential.
Okay, Rich? More?
No, I was just saying, I'm not opposed to the policy.
Yeah.
But, you know, we need it.
I knew that.
I don't want us to get sued.
Yeah.
Well,
We will, but I don't want us to be unfairly sued. Yeah.
Greg?
Yeah, we had a conversation, I think it was at a ledge meeting, about diversity, equity, inclusion lens and looking at things that way. Rich, I totally understand the point about value neutral, right? Because there's multiple sides to that conversation. How does it align with, and I guess the question I have is more of a philosophical question of, should these policies be aligning with our diversity, equity, inclusion statements, our, you know, mission, vision, values of the organization, as opposed to being more legally neutral and broad? I feel like there's a balance that maybe need to be struck there, but I don't think we can abandon, because we're not a values neutral organization. And I don't know how we balance sort of some of the legal concerns, which are valid, and I appreciate raising those, because it forces us and challenges us to understand how are we putting our values into something as an organization versus how are we creating a legally protective document for both the county as the employer and then also the county's employees more broadly, which is what this is intended to help protect. So I don't know the answer to that, but it sort of raised a question on how and what lens we're using as we evaluate these policies.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so there was some question or suggestion that maybe you would take it back, talk to Maury. Everyone okay with that? So do we have to withdraw the motion? I can't remember who moved it. Susan? No, Mike moved it.
I withdraw it.
Okay. And hopefully we'll look at that in the next month or two. Thank you for your work on all of that. All right. Next one is resolution to update the Administrative Policy Manual, Policy 01-53, Cannabis-Free Work Environment. Can somebody move that? Mike moves, Rich seconds.
Yeah, so this is a new policy really to reflect the semi-recent legalization of recreational marijuana in New York State. Again, this was modeled after a Department of Labor issued policy, and it does closely mirror our alcohol-free work environment policy.
Okay, great. Questions? Greg?
How does this relate to, because I'm assuming that recreational use outside of work, this doesn't touch on, but I'm sure that there are probably a classification of employees who, through federal licensing requirements, et cetera, aren't able to do that. And I tried to read through it, and maybe I wasn't comprehending a certain section correctly, but does that mention that at all in here?
On packet page 43, under general information, the second paragraph speaks to the employees that hold a CDL, and then goes on to cite the federal regulations.
Thank you. All right, right on the first page. Sweet, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, other questions or comments? Rich?
On page 45B, I'm wondering whether we need to develop that further, in that drug recognition is a pretty complicated process. You know, this is a real weak link with marijuana. You know, there's no equivalent to the breathalyzer. There is a training program. Our undersheriff was qualified as a drug recognition expert through a pretty rigorous program. I think that's lapsed because she's not in the field, and we don't have one. But I don't oppose the policy. I think we should get it in place, but we should probably think further about how do we do this.
You talking more specifically about enforcement or
Yeah, in B, it talks about a determination of under the influence or impaired can be established by professional opinion and/or based on lay observations by supervisors, coworkers, or others.
Right, but who is that and how do they do that? Yeah, yeah. Mike?
Rich, you're exactly right. Something I've been complaining about for years. Suggested we use some of our opioid money to pay for training for our deputies who need to be out there on the road and recognize this, since all they have now is a blood test to do that. It's even getting worse now. We have an application at the town of Dryden for not only a cannabis dispensary, but they want to have a drive-through. Honest to gosh, this is the truth. And it's right on Route 13. And this is people out there on whether it's cannabis or whatever the drug is, driving down the road is a huge public safety issue for everybody else.
Yep. Other thoughts or questions? Well, I guess, maybe what you're bringing up, Rich, is just something that we need to further develop. Lisa?
I can speak to the early stages of when we were developing this policy. There was a lot of discussion around what is actionable and in terms of procedures, what can we be doing to educate our department heads on this. It's one thing in the public safety for sure, but then just for the majority of the rest of our workforce, and really it's only looking at behaviors that will impact the performance of their job duties, and there's really, it's broad and it's vague, and it's a very difficult thing to take action on other than documenting the job performance issues.
Thanks. Greg?
I would feel more comfortable on packet page 45, section 2B, if we stopped at based on lay observations by supervisors and we left out coworkers and others. I think that we can maybe then provide supervisors with additional training, but the broadening to coworkers and others, I mean, I could say Rich is high right now,
Might be.
I mean, good for you. I don't know. I think that's kind of broad, and we give a lot of authority to other people to make observations, and I could see that being, I don't, like somebody, or I just think that goes a slippery slope. So I think supervisors or a professional opinion, I would be comfortable with.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I think I would agree, because I think a coworker might they could go to their supervisor and say, I think so, and I think Rich is high right now, but.
Sorry, Rich.
Yeah,
sorry, Rich.
I'm being difficult, so I guess I
you
deserve
are.
it. Yes.
It's very difficult today. But the coworker can't make the determination. The supervisor has to make the determination. So I would agree with that. So editing out coworkers or others, that works for me. Does that work for?
But what about the fact that it says based on lay observations? I mean, they're just saying it isn't a lay observation by your coworker to say, I'm seeing smoke coming out of the cab of the truck this person is driving. Isn't that sort of a lay observation?
Yeah, but I don't think a coworker can make a determination about that. I think they could report it.
It says based on lay observation. Okay, I
guess
see.
I'm reading it differently. A determination can be established by a professional opinion or lay observation by a supervisor. That's how I would read it. But do you guys have thoughts?
I was just asking Ruby if it's cited that way in our alcohol-free policy, and it is. So it is based on the lay observations of supervisors, coworkers, or others. Not to say we can't change that, but like I said, we did mirror this policy.
Interesting.
That policy.
And in this instance, lay simply means they haven't gone through that formal training.
Right.
I guess my original objection with can make a determination,
Yeah.
like.
I would agree.
I trust my colleagues, but not
Not to make a determination.
to make a determination.
Yeah. So are you proposing that we cut coworkers or others?
If, I would propose that if there's no significant objection from our HR department or county attorney or administration.
Rich?
Yeah, and I think that's fine. Certainly a supervisor could base their determination on information received from coworkers and others.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what this intends to say.
Okay.
So I think there's two ways to do it. One is the way Greg suggested. Another would be to, add a sentence that says something like, determination of whether an employee is under the influence may be made by the employee supervisor, human resources, something like that, and then say the determination may be based on such things as a professional opinion.
Right.
Or the simpler fix that Craig had suggested.
Right. Okay.
I would propose that. I'd
Okay.
like to make that amendment.
Okay. Does anyone object to that?
Friendly. I think I seconded today.
That's okay.
Great. So we've got that change. Then on a side note, we don't have to answer this right now, but if that's also in the alcohol policy, we may want to look at that wording again at some point. Okay. Anything else on this from anyone? All right, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, last resolution is the resolution to update the Administrative Policy Manual, Policy 01-23, Tobacco-Free Workplace. Can somebody move that? Susan moves, Rich seconds. And
This is a very simple, minor update to this policy. As we were working on the previous policy, we wanted to make sure the definition of county property and facilities were the same in both policies. So we've made those adjustments in the definition to county facilities and property.
all right. Questions? Susan?
Question on page 48, tobacco products.
Microphone, so we can't quite hear you.
I'm so sorry, I thought it was there. Tobacco products as defined by the FDA include cigarettes, blah, blah, blah. Then in parentheses, it says dip, snuff, and then SNUS. What is that?
Snooze.
I don't even know what that is.
That is either.
We don't know what
Is that a thing?
It is, I've seen it in convenience stores.
Yeah, I don't-
It's a tobacco product.
Okay, thank you. Just
Wow.
Don't know, other than that.
something new to try.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's not on county property.
Just not on county property.
Right, not in here.
Okay, any other questions? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, as always, yeah, thank you for these interesting and informative policies. And please just don't ever bring back the flag policy.
Come on, come on.
Or do.
I think it's due for review.
I think so.
No, please. Send it to a different committee.
More flags.
Oh, gosh. All right, well, thank you. All right, so we are now going to talk about the adoption of the Tompkins County Strategic Operations Plan, 2024 to 2029. Can somebody move that resolution? Greg moves, seconded by Susan. So as you all know, we have been working on this for a long time. We kind of all felt like it was ready to go. It's been, you all remember, we've had many updates here. at the last legislature meeting, or previous to that, there was some concerns from Deborah. So we wanted to just have another chance to talk about this and see if further changes need to be made. Obviously, Deborah isn't here right now, but I can sort of briefly summarize her thoughts, and then I guess my question to you all would be, is that something, are these things something we would want to change? And then if there is something we want to change, we can do that and send it on to the full legislature. So as I understood her concerns, and I'm not necessarily advocating for or against, but you know, we have the priorities, we have all the things we've laid out that, you know, ideally we will do in the future. But her concern was that we need to state specifically that we will do these things as it is fiscally responsible. I think her concern was that somebody might read it and say, well, you're not doing all these things, and on our side, we may not feel like we have the funding to do some of them. We may not be able to do it this year, but we're going to do it next year. So there is language that was added, and Bridget can help me pick it out, but there is language in the resolution on packet page 51. The plan seeks to align the work of county staff and fiscal resources with the objectives therein. And there's somewhere it talks about the budget, doesn't it? Or is that's in the actual material, there's a place where it talks about, you know, aligning this with the budget, and that these things will be considered in the process of the yearly budget process. So in my mind, that seems to cover it, but do you have thoughts?
And just an additional note along those lines, the value of stewardship was also a new county value that was added as a part of this process. So just to point to that.
Right, which is we value our human, financial, and environmental resources and provide services in a manner that responsibly manage and preserve those resources into the future. So, yeah, Rich.
Were you done? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I had thought about what Deborah was raising, and I think it is largely implicit, but I don't think there's any problem with stating it explicitly. And what I came up with on page 51 on line 10, after high-level goals, adding the words, within the economic and financial limits of local government.
Would you say county government?
Sure.
Okay, say it again.
Within the economic and financial limits of county government.
How, Lisa and Bridget, how do you feel about that?
I'm just looking at my page. Are you on packet page 51?
Yes.
So it's within the resolution?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about page 55 in a moment.
Oh, okay, okay. So I'm sorry, could you repeat one more time now that I'm with you? Okay.
Sure. After high-level goals, put in within the economic and financial limits of county government.
Up on line 10.
Yes, sure.
And I would suggest adding the same language on packet page 55 in the role of county government sidebar, right at the end.
And outlining what the county needs to achieve its goals within the economic and financial limits of county government. Okay. How do folks feel about that? Thumbs up from Greg. Susan's nodding. Mike's nodding. Bridget and Lisa, does that feel doable? Okay, works for me. Again, I do feel like it is stated in other places, and you know, I would hope that most reasonable people would understand that we aren't gonna like suddenly go out the door tomorrow and do all of these things and within, you know, immediately. But I think that's good language, Rich. Thanks for coming up with that. Okay, are there any other things to talk about with this strategic plan? This is another chance to make any amendments or changes or bring up concerns. It will then go to the next legislature meeting? Okay. Okay, all right, all in favor? Great, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you again for working on this. Okay. Lost track of where we are. All right. Back to our ongoing review, just general discussion about the county charter. I thought that just the first article with general information would be a good thing to catch up on. I thought that all the definitions were kind of interesting and important to read. This is the whole of Article 1. The past couple meetings we've looked at Article 2, which is related to the legislature. If there are specific topics that folks want to brush up on, you can certainly let me know and we can include that. But any questions or comments? Mike?
I just thought I might mention how the Charter Review Committee, which we have to have every 10 years, how we approached this. And we actually, the committee sat down and we read every item line by line aloud. And we made comments. And as we got to the various sections having to do with the county administrator, for example, we had the county administrator in to talk about what kind of changes might need to be made. And that's, what, 5, 6, 7 years ago that we did that. So I think looking at it again now is a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah, Rich, Mr. Difficult.
I am, and I'm going to be difficult now, the county seal. Because I was reading this and I was thinking, oh yeah, but are there 13 stars?
No, there aren't. We talked about that.
All right, so we need to get a white marker and
it's
add
one
them.
of those things that you just overlook.
So how many stars are there?
10?
Oh yeah, there's only 10.
For the 10 colonies.
It's symmetrical.
Right, 13 would be uneven. Huh. Are you proposing a change?
Yeah, I think in our charter we should change it to the 10 colonies.
I don't know how many are on the seal we impressed.
Let's see.
We probably need to look at that.
Okay.
Well then, 5, 7, and 8 up above. And I think they got that.
Yeah, that's right. Dominic has a thought.
I just want to mention that the county seal that I believe that that's referencing is the black and white one that we use in all of our materials. That's the only place where that painted county seal shows up.
Oh, like right on the strategic plan.
Yes, you can see in that example, I believe there are 13. I'll feel bad if there's not exactly 13.
10, 11, 12, 13.
Yeah, so I think that's the one that we use in our materials and in the official notices or communications related to the county.
Okay, that's good to point out. Thank you. Katrina?
The seal that I use to emboss different documents and stuff does have 13.
Okay.
The 3 lost colonies.
All right.
What's the historical significance of the one that hangs here in Chambers?
I don't know.
Mike, do you know the background
Where
of
this
that?
came from?
I don't know. It's just always been there since I've been here, obviously, and long before that. In pictures in the old chambers, they used to have that picture of Daniel Tompkins there, and not that seal. So I don't have the answer to that one.
Maybe it's time to commission a 13-starred seal.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's a nice anomaly.
It was very perceptive of you. I never would have thought of that.
Well, when I read it, I said, oh, I got to look at the seal.
We did. We talked about that.
Okay, other comments or questions about this section of the charter? All right. Well, we will continue to look at other sections, and if folks, again, have specific things they want to talk about, please let me know. And we're good on time, so let's go ahead with our reports. I just wanted to remind folks that our July meeting is not going to be on the first Thursday, but it is on, sorry, when is it? Oh, it's on July 15th, which is a Monday at 10 a.m. We changed that due to folks being out of town and various holidays. I also was remiss earlier in the meeting, got distracted by public comment from introducing Maury Josephson to his first GO meeting. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
And you will find that this really is the best committee, and we have the most fun here. So you'll look forward to it, trust me.
So far, so good.
Anything from County Administrator?
I don't have anything further. I do want to point out or mention that Charlene Holmes, our Chief Equity Diversity Officer, had a conflict with today's meetings. She does have some updated information and materials, which I could share, but I kind of think it would be more effective for her to be able to speak to them, so we can do that at the next meeting.
Okay, great. Any questions for Lisa? All right. Maury, County Attorney, any updates?
No update at this time.
Great, thanks. Lori, Director of Finance.
Nothing today, thank you.
Oh, all right. You guys are making it go quick. Communications Director, Dominic.
Thanks. I do have several just brief minor updates for you today. Another note about that county seal is our brand colors that we have for Tompkins County that we use are the paint colors that are used in that seal. So if you see us use a green, red, brown, yellow, those are all pulled from that, which is a nice touch. On that note, I've been assisting the Office of Human Rights with an entire rebranding effort to sort of reintroduce the office and its work to the public. We'll be talking about that at the HHS meeting on the 17th. So if you're interested in learning more about how they're doing their public information and outreach efforts, I'd encourage you to watch or attend that meeting. And then we'll be publicly launching it after that. I've been updating this group on where we are in the website process. Today I have no updates on that process after our last meeting. And I just wanted to share some data from the language translation efforts that we've been implementing in Tompkins County over the past few years. So the data that I'll share, these are the number of pages on our website that were requested in each of the following languages in 2023 from January 1 to December 31. So on our website, 49,500 pages were requested in simplified Chinese, 43,000 in traditional Chinese, 42,000 in French, 40,000 in Karen, which is used by Burmese individuals in our community, 33,000 for Spanish, 33,000 for Russian, 32,000 for Arabic, and 29,000 for Vietnamese. Those are page views, so that's someone may be looking at several pages while they're, that's not individual people. That's number of pages that those folks are looking at. But those numbers are, in my opinion, they're far beyond what I would have expected. So it just shows that people in our community are using those materials very frequently. I've spoken recently with Tompkins Learning Partners just to check in and confirm with them on how some of their participants are using the information that we've translated. And they're very appreciative of being able to help people navigate our website in their language. And it all is sort of in accordance with the language access policy that was updated, I think, in 2022. So that work is ongoing, and we're continuing to, sort of update and make sure that that content is great for the public.
That's amazing. Those are high numbers.
Yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, that's wonderful. So a person could go on and get one of our pages and have it translated, and is that what's happening?
Yes. Our site is currently translated into these 8 different languages. We have a breakdown of how the content is translated. Some content meets the definition of critical public information and is therefore translated by a human. Think whole health information, emergency response, some sheriff's office information, things that people need to know and have absolutely correct that might get lost in translation. So health information is probably the primary area there. And then there's a significant number of pages that are translated by machine translation with human reviewers. So computers translating it, people are reviewing it, professional translators are reviewing it. And then there's some that's just translated by the machine. There's 3 layers of how it works. And the average for our regular website for English users of number of pages that people look at per time visiting the site is around 3. So, that means one user is looking at 3 pages. I can't do the math off the top of my head, but that's the general average of what people are surfing it for.
Can people get siren messages in translation?
It's a slightly more complicated system because some people's phones automatically do that for them. But our current siren notifications when they deliver to someone are not translated into all of those different languages.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions for Dominic about this or other communications questions? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting us know what's going on. Any updates from committee members or questions or comments? Greg?
Yeah, I just have one. I got this book, The Marvelous Adventures of County Land, which was an AI experiment from the National Association of Counties. And I thought if you'll just entertain me for a quick second, there are 2 that I thought were pretty fitting today. This is a great sort of introduction into what county government is, and done in a really sort of playful and storied way. So with a visionary plan and keen insights, county administrators work by day and night, managing and organizing and exploring it all with the noble goal, a better future for us all. So I thought that was very applicable to our county administration. And then the other one is meet the assessor with maps, data, and charts. Determining values for taxes is their art. Houses, land, and buildings too, old and new, fair and true. And then the last part is marvelous counties we'll explore with public officials we all adore. Each one special, tailored to store, adventures await with wonders galore. So I just thought this was a really neat, there's a copy in Dan's office if you want to take a look, but again, I think the more we can sort of break down the complexities of it all and get people engaged in a fun and youthful way, this is a great option. There's a free version online, and I think it's like a $5 donation to get a hard copy book. So I got one for the office, and I have one in my desk if anybody wants to take a look. There's some on the county attorney and finance, so maybe at a future meeting I'll read an excerpt.
Those, yeah, definitely.
It comes from NACO?
Yeah, this is so the director of the National Association of Counties worked with an AI publication and some AI art. It's a really well put together book.
So AI thinks that elected officials are adored?
You know, what data you feed it, I'm not sure. Some may call that part rigged, I don't know.
Yeah. But I'm sure that the county administrator does work day and night.
Day and night, for sure.
I'm glad to learn that AI can rhyme.
Yeah, it can do a lot. It's a really cool book, so I just thought I'd highlight a few little things from it today.
Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
Rich?
I had a couple things. One is, I noticed that the heat pumps are running for the Key Bank building. Are we air conditioning that building?
Not that I'm aware of, but thank you, I'll check into that.
Okay, that's one. The other one was, it seems like our screens, maybe this is a Dominic question, are a success, that we've adapted to what we have here. Are these going away? Are we going to clean up our ceiling?
I can update on the ceiling in the next meeting because I don't want to misspeak on the timeline for that.
But something's underway.
Ultimately, yes, those should be removed.
Okay.
Yeah, so far, it seems as though the screens have been a success. Continue to give us any feedback if you have any on the use of the materials. And I will briefly use that time to mention, thanks for bearing with that technical glitch during the legislature meeting this week. The entire system upstairs crashed for the first time it's happened in that way. Rob was able to troubleshoot it really quickly. The clerks were on top of it, no problem. But we submitted a ticket to the company that produces the switchboard for us to look into it.
Yeah, thank you. Mike?
Yeah, if you're going to take the screens down, I think we ought to lower the chandeliers. They were raised particularly because of that. They used to hang down probably another 5-6 feet.
All right, well.
Thank you, Mike.
Katrina can probably talk to Arel and, yeah.
Or we can probably just do it and go up there.
Yeah, I'd like to see you guys up on a ladder, sure.
Yeah, but I was going to say, when they get something in, they get the man lift or whatever they have in here, that would be a time to get an electrician to look at that.
Yeah, and then I guess just random thought, like those screens, will they be like, try to be resold or like in terms of like reuse equipment type of thing?
I would have to look at the policy for the reuse or sale of county equipment and sort of follow that through.
Yeah.
The screens definitely have more life potentially in the screens. The projectors may not have more life in them. So that's a great question.
Yeah.
And the screens are also remote controlled with the whole system, so that may also limit its ability to be reconfigured. But
Well, I'd appreciate if you looked into
absolutely,
just instead of them going to a landfill.
Of course.
Okay. Anything else before this committee today? Mike?
I sent out or forwarded an email from President Kremenek at TC3 about something that's going on at the state legislature about trying to require all community colleges to add another trustee to their boards. That person would be from perhaps one of the labor unions or some of the staff positions. And the problem that the community college presidents and others are seeing with that is that that person would have an automatic conflict of interest with respect to many things that are being decided by the Board of Trustees. And they are opposed to that. They've asked, apparently it's still moving through the assembly. But it could be a problem, you know, the policy is that a person shouldn't be serving who has a direct financial interest in the organization. And that's true with all of the appointees. But if you bring someone in who is a paid employee of the college in some way, that person has a direct financial conflict when things like the budget are discussed.
Lisa?
Thanks for bringing that up, Mike. I'd forgotten to mention, Dave Lucas from NISAC had sent an email out to the county administrators asking if anyone saw any issues with this proposed legislation, and several people, including myself, responded back that it would pose a conflict of interest for the community college.
Is there anything else we can do? Should we have I don't know if it's too late to do a resolution or anything, the way it's the end of the session, or?
He didn't, and I think NISAC was in the midst of formulating their opinion on it based on what they're hearing back. So, but I'm not sure about the timeline issue and whether it's, whether it has traction at the state level in the legislature.
Thank you.
Rich?
Yeah, Mike, thanks for bringing that up. I looked through the email stuff, and I had a question about bargaining unit information, that you'd seem to have a real confidentiality issue there.
There's another one.
And also, for a community college that is owned by 2 different counties, you now have an odd number. And I was wondering, how would we pick somebody Would it be Tompkins County or Cortland County? It just seemed problematic. I don't know.
I don't know what the legislation says. It must have some mechanism in it. Maybe it's appointed by the governor. I don't know. Like a gubernatorial appointment. Don't know. Okay.
To be determined, I guess. Okay. All right. Thank you all so much for being here. Good meeting. Appreciate you all. And we are adjourned.